Bring in show music, please.
Hi, I'm CNBC producer Katie Kramer. Today on Squawk Pod, Kamala Harris rolling out an economic plan.
Key to creating this opportunity economy is building up our middle class.
That includes cracking down on inflated prices. Is this 70s-style price controls? Heritage Foundation's Stephen Moore joins us.
Sock it to businesses. That businesses are bad, profits are bad. We have to limit the prices that they're charging.
Or is it the response to voters asking, why don't you do something? Groundwork Collaborative's Lindsay Owens.
If you're a company who relies on ripping off consumers, you ought to be taking a close look at your business model.
And negotiated drug prices, former FDA head Scott Gottlieb on the market for prescriptions.
Really what should happen is the net price should be the list price. You should have true pricing in the marketplace.
Plus, stocks shake off a speed bump for the best week of the year. Joe Kernan is joined today by Mike Santoli and Kelly Evans.
A friend still in the brokerage business has said Kelly must sleep with a nightlight on. You couldn't think of buy some NVIDIA, some AMD?
On the fear factors versus the numbers.
You started this.
I had to. Welcome back.
You totally started this. Thank you. I missed you too.
It's Monday, August 19th. Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand by in 3, 2, 1. Cue, please.
Good morning and welcome to Squawk Box here on CNBC. We're live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Kelly Evans along with Joe Kernan and Mike Santoli this morning. Andrew and Becky are off today.
The best weeks of the year for stocks.
The market comeback rolls on following last Monday's massive sell-off. It's like a distant memory. The major averages posting their...
Last week, the Dow was up about 3%, the S&P nearly 4%, and the NASDAQ up 5.3%. Quite impressive. Treasury yields, meantime, they've been kind of mixed, treading water. I'm trying to think of a good way Mike Santoli would describe them. 387. Any color to add on that, Mike?
They're hovering, they're churning, they're not doing a whole lot. But they also have not gone up very much, even as the stock market has rallied. That's one little element we could talk about.
It's either a sign of good news or
exactly.
I don't know what. And crypto, Joe, this one's for you. Bitcoin 58 and change. And gold, I actually I had a tweet I was going to make up just to get you going, but why stir the pot? The tweet was basically saying that gold has outperformed Bitcoin in the past.
Quite a bit.
Something, and
it's at 2,500
with less volatility.
Oh my God!
I'll find it.
Okay.
I saved it literally. Okay, here it is, just for you. Since 2021, Bitcoin 59K to 59K, gold 1750 to 2500. In the past 10 years, gold's largest drawdown, 21%. Bitcoin's 82, 58,
Can
65.
We do it? Okay. The obvious thing is that let's do a 10-year chart of gold and Bitcoin. I mean, you're not
Larry
really.
McDonald, that was.
You're not really.
No.
Does that change your view of whatever argument you were making?
You can't even see gold there. It's just a flat line. It is
is that, say, 12,420?
Yeah.
Versus.
Right.
Almost a double.
From the moment.
Almost a double. That's almost as good as. Do you still got those I bonds? What are those yielding now? They're so
they've
great.
Got to be yielding 3%.
They are. And you max them out. You can go to dinner. You can't get an appetizer. But on the interest, you can take, well, not your family, no lady in the shoe. But you could take a normal family, but not have a. I mean, come on.
No, but. It's up that much from the moment when nobody owned it and nobody talked about it.
Go 5
and
years.
so the point
years.
when the maximum number of people were talking about it and owning it was
do 5 years
on the way up in 2021.
do 5 years. Do 5 years. Do whatever. That is such a. Gold has done absolutely nothing.
Trust me, I'm not arguing in favor of gold.
Gold has. But here's what I'll say about gold. Bitcoin, when the VIX goes to 50. And people need something to cover margin calls, they sell their Bitcoin.
Yes.
When there's volatility like that or something in the Mideast, people pile into gold right now. When you hear about price controls, someone actually with a straight face talks about price controls, you're going to see gold go up. You're going to some of this other stuff, you're going to see gold. So in that regard, but just in terms of,
I thought it needed a response.
But. You were on the show. When was that? People
That's
still
why I brought it up.
People still tweeted out, I begged you because my friends were saying
It was like April, May of
my friends were saying
2023.
Kelly's going to buy some crappy what were you going to buy? A 2-year 4%.
I think at the time it must have been like a 2-year.
A friend still in the brokerage business has said Kelly must sleep with a nightlight on. You couldn't buy some Nvidia, some AMD.
No, I remember saying to you too. You buy the market. You're not reinvesting in treasuries. You're going to buy
Bitcoin.
And instead of down 30%, stocks are up about 40. Yeah, since then.
Yeah, but also, Bitcoin was at 25,000 then.
Last spring.
People are making note of the fact it's very, very narrow time horizon that you've seen the stock market go down 10%, up 8% based on the S&P 500 in the last 5 weeks, right? It was down for 3 weeks, up for 2 weeks. Nvidia, massive round trip. NASDAQ 100 still lagging, still 6% below, and Bitcoin hasn't gone back to the highs. So it's a little bit of a change of character in what's working in the market. To me, it doesn't say anything about the utility of these things.
Don't some people, the perma crypto bears, the future involves iris scans paid for in WorldCoin in crypto so we can tell robots from other people who already Mark Zuckerberg would flunk. I mean, he is not going to be able to pass the robot to the Turing test. But did you read that?
No, what?
Oh, my God. Okay, get out your Wall Street Journal. Lead story of the Wall Street Journal. Sam Altman wants to look at every single person's eye scan in the world to be able to tell the difference between robots and people. And to do that, you're going to get paid in something called WorldCoin. Okay, and we still have people who don't think crypto is ever going to be a real thing. Now, I don't know whether this is going to happen, but did you ever think you'd be reading that in the Wall Street Journal? Did you read it and think, I didn't?
I read it and thought somebody is always defining the fringe of where we're going in terms of.
It's kind of a cool idea, though, that every person in the world, the iris scan,
something unique,
and it's a basketball-sized device that does it. That's called what's called an orb.
This is the sentence. WorldCoin verify. This is top of the fold. Wall Street Journal
Top of
tonight.
the fold.
WorldCoin verifies humanness by scanning irises using a basketball-sized device called the orb. They say irises can better distinguish humans than fingerprints.
Can you? See, I'm worried about me. Can you be a human but not show a whole lot of humanness? Is that, or if you are a human, does everyone? You can show more or less humanness.
I'm sure they're saying
this is what we're gonna have
fingerprints
to drill into.
What
or
time
faces
is it?
can be generated by. I know. Well,
sorry, well, you started this.
I had to. Welcome back.
You totally started this. Thank you. I missed you too.
The Democratic National Convention does kick off today at the United Center in Chicago, and among the speakers include President Biden, also First Lady Dr. Jill Biden and Hillary Clinton, tomorrow Barack and Michelle Obama, Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff, and Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker. On Wednesday, VP Harris's running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, and former President Bill Clinton and former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. She has a new book out, by the way. Very interesting reading. Vice President Harris will formally accept her party's nomination on Thursday and address the convention. More than 20,000 protesters are expected to cram into a 1.4-mile-long protest route near the convention. Among the 264 groups that have said they'll protest, most are focused on Palestinian rights, ending the war in Gaza, and reducing U.S. aid to Israel.
Dr. Jill Biden, man, what happened there? We were hearing from her.
Still on the cover of Vogue right now.
Well, as the end of, but in the last, I took off. How long was I off? I was gone for a week. I mean, life moves pretty fast. And if you don't stop and look around a little bit, it can pass you by. I mean, when I left, I think, wasn't Vice President Harris kind of a failed vice president? At this point, have you noticed?
I think that was longer ago than a week.
Was it longer than a week?
That was a couple of weeks.
It's been 2 weeks.
I'm not sure too much happened in the past week. Other than it's now done. It's a done deal.
Now a combo of Joan of Arc, Mother Teresa, and Madam
What's
Curie.
your list of the most successful vice presidents?
Right. Okay. But do you not see?
I mean, Kelly's running.
Yeah, that's
so maybe
right.
that's a.
But you haven't noticed any change in the way we. Have you mentioned that things are like that, or is that not the unmentionable? I mean, because it doesn't involve.
Come into my sphere.
Yeah. Okay.
It doesn't.
All right.
Meanwhile, Vice President Harris did roll out her economic plan Friday in a speech in Raleigh, North Carolina, ramping up her attacks on corporations, accusing them of driving up grocery store prices. She proposed a federal ban on price gouging for food and groceries, didn't explain exactly how it would work. She's proposing a $25,000 subsidy for first-time home buyers and a tax incentive for companies that build starter homes and affordable rental ones. She's also proposing to restore the expanded child tax credit, $3,600 per child. It expired in 2022 and will seek to add a new $6,000 tax credit for families with a child in the first year of life. The campaign said it would raise taxes on wealthy individuals as a means of offsetting middle-class tax cuts. So that, Joe, in fairness, you did miss. That was quite a lot.
Well, I'm looking to find out. It dropped out of the race. Was it July 21st?
Of what?
It was July
Biden.
2024.
I thought you meant when she dropped out of the
No, but so you're right. It wasn't.
It was a couple.
It was much longer than just my being off for 9 days.
But
it was almost 3 weeks.
But now you can address the economic plan.
It was almost 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
So it was much longer than I thought to go from what we used to think to
what we think
what now is just so hopey and changing.
Or we went from things that you didn't have to have an opinion about.
So you think people really weren't sure of how they felt? None of those videos.
I don't think there were strong enough feelings in any direction.
It doesn't matter.
Among people who don't look for things to get angry.
So we don't remember Iowa not making it to that, or the 1% or of approval, so that.
I don't think it matters. I honestly don't think.
Well,
it matters.
it doesn't appear to matter at this point when you've got
Isn't this true with every politics?
No.
Is a matter of people and timing. That's it. The same things that didn't work for you said a year, 4 years, all suddenly it's a bit. Look at Trump. It can work one time. Maybe it's not going to work.
I don't see
another
how
time.
you suddenly come back from, no private health insurance and no fracking and ending the filibuster and getting rid of ICE and defunding the police and suddenly become a moderate.
Because if you switch and
she hasn't switched. She hasn't said anything about.
She didn't say she's not. She didn't say she's not.
Okay, you guys are in lockstep.
Joe, you don't think she'd do it?
There's no lockstep with the mainstream media in terms of totally switching.
I think what we're seeing is a real world test of everybody going into July 21st saying, if only there was an alternative to these two particular guys.
Now, eggs are getting more expensive. Once again, prices rose for a third straight month in July, soaring 19% year over year. The increase this time is linked to an outbreak of avian flu earlier this year. In July, the average price of a dozen large grade A eggs topped $3 for the first time in more than a year. That is still more than 20% below the recent high back in January of 2023, which followed a previous spike in avian flu cases.
I had to do some more digging on this because I didn't. Okay, so we know they crashed last year after the. Okay.
After the run-up.
St. Louis Fred, thank you for being a public service, tracks the price of eggs.
Sure.
It is $3 right now. The peak was when it went to, call this 4 or 5. Pre-pandemic, we were about $1.62.
Right. And we've seen this in the past, and there was I forget the biggest egg producer.
Cal-Maine.
Remember when that quadrupled because of the Atkins diet?
That's right.
Oh,
that was a big part of
really?
the demand side, yeah, for sure.
From the Atkins diet. And if you were on a desert island, if you could just have one food, it might be eggs. So if you're not going to eat, if you are going to go on the Atkins diet, eggs are pretty good.
We looked into getting chickens because of this, because it's true.
Well,
but
which came first?
There's some upkeep involved.
So if you're on a desert island, your companion, you want a chicken, you'd say, that's how I'm going to sustain.
By the way, the price of Cal-Maine stock here, I bet you didn't know.
Yep.
Even ticker calm, obviously, this stock is at all-time highs.
Again, at all-time highs.
It's
interesting.
70 and change.
My idea is, because we love chicken wings so much.
Oh, no.
No, I've told you this before.
That's a one-time.
What?
Are you going to get chickens for the chicken wings?
Oh, no.
No, I want genetically modified chickens with like 8 wings.
Right.
I will have Sam
down to
Altman.
the size of chicken breasts, right?
Yeah.
Or what about a chicken with 4 breasts?
Yeah, there you go.
Altman will work.
Meanwhile, you didn't sell the executive edge part of that. I thought that was right there for you.
That would have been really nice because that would have been excellent.
Cheese will be next.
Coming up next on Squawk Pod, debating the Harris economic plan to limit price gouging for consumers. Groundwork Collaborative's Lindsay Owens.
Grocery margins are at a 20-year high. There is real room for grocery margins to come down.
And former President Trump's economic advisor, Steve Moore.
Are we really going to have, federal regulation police going down the aisles of grocery stores and telling grocery owners what they can charge for their prices? I mean, come on, what is this, the Soviet Union?
We'll be right back. Welcome back to Squawk Pod.
As president, I will be laser focused on creating opportunities for the middle class that advance their economic security, stability, and dignity. Together, we will build what I call an opportunity economy. An opportunity economy.
Vice President Kamala Harris will accept the Democratic nomination for president at the party's convention kicking off today in Chicago. And what Harris says and doesn't say about attempts to keep high consumer prices from going higher is catching the attention of economists all across the spectrum. We'll dig into this key issue as the abbreviated 2024 race for the White House takes shape. Joe Kernan is joined today by Mike Santoli and Kelly Evans.
Vice President Kamala Harris rolling out her economic agenda. Let's bring in our panel. Stephen Moore, Trump economic advisor and the Heritage Foundation senior visiting fellow, and Lindsay Owens, Groundwork collaborative executive director. I'll start with you, Steve, because it unfortunately both sides have sort of some whataboutism. And I hear tariffs. We know tariffs probably aren't great, and yet both sides think that there's certain times when there's dumping or whatever, where it's the only choice that a country has is to actually do tariffs. So you can actually have hardcore Austrian economics advocates that will say maybe it's okay. I'm hearing the same thing about certain price controls now. In your view, are they always bad? Because I'm an absolutist there. I think that there's shortages and Econ 101, we know how prices are set. That's from supply and demand. And it's just a fool's errand to try to do price controls.
Well, you're exactly right about that. And I think you called it Economics 100, and you're right. And unfortunately, a major presidential candidate has endorsed an idea that would flunk Economics 100. Almost every economist would agree. I think all of us would agree that price controls have never worked. They certainly were a complete failure in the 1970s when we had major inflation that hit 11, 12%, and the government couldn't get rid of it. But I think what's really frightening to me is that you've got Kamala Harris now and all her economic advisors who are endorsing an economically dingbat idea. And this really calls into question, it would be like having a football coach who doesn't know anything about the forward pass. I mean, come on, this is basic economics. And what worries me as well is the whole kind of premise of the Kamala Harris agenda is sock it to businesses, that businesses are bad, profits are bad, we have to limit the prices that they're charging. Well, come on, look, this is an investor show. Without profits, you don't have businesses. Without businesses, you don't have jobs. This is just a real assault on the whole free enterprise system, and it's troubling that you have a major presidential candidate that would endorse these things.
I'm going to get to you in a second, Lindsay, but I was saying about what we heard about eggs today. It just seems like, Steve, you could sell it to people, to the public, by saying the pandemic was a sort of a one-off, and there were things that were happening that would allow companies to game the system and keep prices high. Right now, there's avian flu. So you could see how companies would say, wow, this is my opportunity to raise prices. But in my view, whatever is the extraneous factor, whatever does it, you're still going to dislocate normal supply and demand by putting price controls on, and you're going to end up with shortages no matter what. But are there times when you could do it? Is there a way of where it's not a bad policy to institute price controls when there's something allowing companies to game the system?
Yeah, what's especially dangerous about the idea is she's talking about grocery stores and 7-Elevens. I mean, if you actually have you'll put grocery stores out of business. As you know, they only have 2 or 3% margins. So you put price controls, they'll go out of business, and people will actually have, not have access to food, which is a dangerous situation. The question, of course, is why they would endorse something so idiotic.
Well, because it sells, I think. Let me get to Lindsay. Lindsay, and that's what everybody's telling me today, is that people want something done. People want something done. And this look. Hold on. Let me get to Lindsay. Lindsay, is that there's something to that? That it looks like they're taking some action and they're not really serious about taking it too far with price controls?
Look, I listened to the vice president's speech on Friday, and what I heard is someone who's laser focused on lowering costs for American families, particularly the costs that matter most, the cost of a roof over your head and food on the table. And she laid out a couple of proposals. The first thing she said she was going to do is crack down on price fixing by companies like RealPage. This is the data software company that lets corporate landlords collude on rent prices. She said they're not going to be able to do that anymore under my administration. The second thing she said is she's going to do a new federal price gouging ban on food and grocery. This is not price controls. 40 states have price gouging laws on the books. These are red states, these are blue states. This is Idaho, this is Texas, this is Louisiana. Donald Trump did price gouging laws. He used the executive authority he had under the Defense Production Act to crack down on price gouging of medical supplies during the pandemic. So this is a common sense set of policies. We need a new ban at the federal level on the books. But the reason that she's proposing something like this is because it works. She successfully prosecuted cheaters after wildfires in California. We just saw Cal-Maine, the nation's largest egg producer, was convicted at a jury trial of price gouging. Bird flu is a great example. It is ridiculous if your business model is to wait around for the bird flu and really gouge consumers to rake in record profits. By the way, this isn't about bringing supply back online. At the jury trial, what we found out about Cal-Maine is that they were fanning the flames of this supply shortage, exacerbating it. They were culling the flock. They were exporting the eggs to keep the shortage going here at home in the United States. So I think Harris is exactly right to be taking this on. And by the way, if you're a company who relies on ripping off consumers, you ought to be taking a close look at your business model, because this really doesn't speak well of you.
That's the invisible hand, Steve. Is that what a classic economist would think controls price gouging or disallows companies from being uncompetitive with their competitors? That you can't run a business. It's not going to work. You're not going to maximize profits by not having market prices.
Well, look, we have an example of price controls that the Biden-Harris administration has put on, and that was with pharmaceutical drugs in Medicare. And guess what? We just have a study coming out that we estimate as many as 1 million seniors are going to lose their drug coverage through Medicare because of these price controls. So it's a perfect example where price controls actually hurt the people that they are supposed to help. But look, she's talking about price controls on grocery stores, which have these tiny margins. And if you look at what has happened over the last 3.5 years with the consumer price index, the consumer price index has gone up exactly the same amount as the producer price index. So that is to say, stores and companies are charging more because their costs are higher. Why are their costs higher? Because Joe Biden, Kamala Harris engaged in a $5 trillion spending spree, printing money, and that causes inflation. It's not complicated.
Lindsay, there has been a lot of inflation, and you know maybe Steve's wrong. Maybe it wasn't the money printing. Maybe it was the pandemic or supply chain or whatever it was. But if we had capped prices, and I think they're up 20%, a lot of different prices, do you think it would have been there would have been negative consequences to disallowing those companies to charge what they needed to charge to keep up with producer prices? Historically, have you seen instances, whether you want to talk Venezuela or whether you want to talk the Nixon price controls, whatever you want to do to go back in time, Have you seen where that has been bad policy and it's not as simple as just capping prices? It doesn't work that way because then there's a black market, then rich people can get the goods somewhere else, and the poor people end up, eating Rover and kitty cat down in Venezuela. They ate their pets, Lindsay.
Yeah, look, again, nobody is here having a conversation about price controls. We could do that some other day over a drink. But what's being proposed here is price gouging legislation. This is common sense legislation that many states use. I don't think Arkansas is Venezuela. I don't think Texas and Idaho are Venezuela. These are really common sense consumer protections that say, look, you're a company, you can't rip off consumers. You can't use the pandemic or a period of high inflation as an excuse to run up the score. By the way, this isn't sort of a case of just a few bad apples. I challenge you to get up a single aisle in the grocery store without finding a case of price gouging or price fixing. There are current cases of price gouging and price fixing in eggs, in sugar, in frozen French fries, in poultry, in beef, in milk. So I think it makes a ton of sense for the vice president to bring her prosecutorial eye to this particular issue. And I think she'll be quite successful. And again, if you're a company who doesn't make your profit, who doesn't depend on ripping off consumers, on frustrating consumers, there's really nothing to see here. You can go have another cup of coffee and head into the office. If you're a company who depends on price gouging and taking advantage of the bird flu to make a profit, then yeah, you better get into the office and start working on your regulatory memos, because I think you're going to have a lot of trouble in a Harris administration.
Lindsay, real quickly, just before we go, just so people are aware, the CalMine lawsuit was from 2004 to 2008, and the companies involved had 15% of the market. So this is not something that happened the past couple of years. And also, this involved customers who are on an industrial scale. Obviously, any American can get chickens and get eggs that way. Just to your point about grocery stores, are you saying that is it the grocery stores who are the victims here of what the wholesalers are doing? You mentioned French fries and the others. Or is it the grocery stores who are the bad guys here?
Yeah, no one is painting any.
Can I just go start a grocery store? If it's such a great business now, if it's a monopoly business, then why don't I just go open a grocery store and I can capture these wonderful profits that exist? Isn't that probably how it would be competed away if this were a real thing?
Yeah, I mean, the vice president was quite clear in her speech on Friday that she wants to help small grocers get into the market, and she wants these markets to be more competitive. Look, we talk about thin grocery margins, but according to the Council on Economic Advisors, grocery margins are at a 20-year high. There is real room for grocery margins to come down and for folks to pass along those savings to consumers at the checkout line.
Yeah. Steve,
can I just say?
Go ahead, Steve. Go ahead.
Very nice person. Have you ever run a business? Are we really going to have, federal regulation police going down the aisles of grocery stores and telling grocery owners what they can charge for their prices? I mean, come on, what is this, the Soviet Union?
Look, this isn't about the federal government stepping in and running businesses. This is about the federal government doing exactly what they're supposed to do in markets, setting clear rules of the road so that all of the actors know how to play by the rules and can play fairly. And when there are bad actors, cracking down on cheating. This is really classic behavior here. This is exactly what the federal government is supposed to do. This is why we have consumer protection laws. And it's great to see the vice president taking this on.
We do have consumer protection laws, and when when trying to decide objective rules about what's ripping off, what's a fair profit margin, going state by state and say eggs are fair at this price here in Minnesota, but they're not fair. I just don't. We have such a good system now in terms of letting supply and demand. You're exactly
right. That's why we need the federal system. A federal price gouging law makes a lot more sense than going state by state in this case. You're exactly right.
Okay. All right. We're out of time. We got to go. Lindsay, thanks. Steve, thanks. Mike, thank you.
All right. Well, anytime.
Next on Squawk Pod, a look at global healthcare with former FDA Commissioner Dr. Scott Gottlieb, drug pricing here in the U.S., and the concerning spread of Mpox in the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Typically, we think that this clade 1 strain spreads primarily through zoonotic spread through contact with animals. You start to think it's spreading more through casual contact now, household contact, when you see so many children infected, and that's the concern right now.
This is Squawk Pod from CNBC.
Stand by, Joe. Here's Mike. Q.
You're watching Squawk Box on CNBC. I'm Joe Kernan, along with Kelly Evans and Mike Santoli.
The Philippines is meanwhile reporting its first case of Mpox this year from a person with no recent travel outside of the country. The World Health Organization declared the virus a global public health emergency just last week. Joining us now for more, Dr. Scott Gottlieb, former FDA Commissioner, a CNBC contributor. He also serves on the boards of Pfizer and Illumina. Welcome to you. What can you back us up for a second? We've heard of monkeypox. Mpox, is that just renamed? It's been around for how long? And what is the significance of this latest country where it's been found?
Right. There's two different strains of monkeypox, Mpox, that spread in Africa that are endemic to Africa. So in West Africa, we see what we call clade 2, which was the strain that circulated in 2022 and caused the global pandemic and the cases that we saw here in the U.S. What's spreading right now is the different strain, what we call clade 1. That's typically endemic to Central Africa. It's spreading primarily in the DRC, in the Congo right now. There have been 14,000 reported cases, probably vastly understated because they don't have a lot of testing in place, about 500 deaths. The concern is that there's a new variant of this clade 1 strain. So it's called clade 1b right now, and people think it may be spreading more easily through casual contact. And what sort of buttresses that is that 70% of the cases have been in children. About 85% of the deaths, so there's been about 500 deaths, have also been in children inside the Congo. So you start to think, typically we think that this clade 1 strain spreads primarily through zoonotic spread, through contact with animals. You start to think it's spreading more through casual contact now, household contact, when you see so many children infected. And that's the concern right now.
And what happened in 2022 when we started seeing cases that it appeared to be spreading more easily through contact and whatnot?
Yeah, the cases, so the clade 2 typically has been through sexual transmission spread within social networks. That's what we saw here in the U.S. It got into the gay and bisexual community, spread largely within that community. This strain potentially is more contagious through casual contact. So it's not airborne, it's spreading through contact. But the question is it spreading more easily through contact? A lot of the cases probably with children in the DRC are household contact, also spread within institutions inside hospitals and healthcare facilities that are overcrowded. But you worry about what would happen if it got into an institutional setting. Would it spread more easily?
How dangerous is it? Because you mentioned the deaths with children and so forth, but that also a lot of these were spreading in hospitals where presumably people were already potentially quite sick. They maybe don't have the same kind of healthcare in general. How dangerous is it, do you think, to people in general?
So historically, clade 1 has been more deadly than clade 2. So clade 2, the death rate has been historically around 1%. With the clade 1, it's been historically 3 to 4%. Those are statistics that encompass the world. So that's what we see typically in Africa. And in a region with better healthcare system, the death rate should be substantially less. And the death rate with clade 2 when it got into the U.S. was substantially less. So it's still very concerning. The other issue here is that the pox that you get with this new variant aren't as prevalent. They're not as pronounced as you see with clade 2. Well, they're typically in the genital region, right? So they're not on the hands and the feet. So people may have it and not recognize it as easily as they would with the old variant.
Is there anything that can be done?
Well, vaccination, there's oral antivirals that can be taken. That can certainly reduce the symptoms and the risk of sequelae. Also vaccination. The vaccine's about 80% effective if you get 2 doses. Higher than that, about 79%
Who
if
makes it? The
Jynneos by Bavarian Nordic. And they should have enough doses for the U.S. It's still hard to get the vaccine into Africa right now.
80%. Well,
more than that. It's about 89%.
I was just going to, as an aside, what were those COVID? What was that, about 40%? It's in hindsight, it's really weird to look at that. I think Fauci's had it 3 times or something. But that's neither.
Well,
let's go to Medicare. These prices, is it really 22% price control in the Inflation Reduction Act? The Medicare, we're going to hear a lot of talk about that, a lot of how great it is.
So the net savings is substantially less than 22%. The 22% net savings that they claim they're getting on these 10 drugs is based on 2023 prices. By the time these price controls actually go into effect in 2026, there would have been substantial erosion in the pricing just naturally. So you get to a net reduction that's substantially less than 22%. And for some of these drugs that already had heavy discounts in place, probably the average net reduction right now based on the 2023 prices is like 10%. And by 2026, it would go away. So What I'm saying is there's some drugs on this list that the discount that they extract is no different than where the discount would have been in 2026. I think pharmaceutical executives are reluctant to say
They're not
that.
gonna say anything.
Because they want people
yeah.
to think that they got a hit when they didn't.
But on top of this, in terms of deficit reduction and everything else from the Inflation Reduction Act, there's something. They're borrowing from Peter to pay Paul on Medicare Part D. How much money?
Right. So they're buying down what would have been a premium increase in the Part D drug benefit this year that cost about $5 billion. They didn't want that premium increase in an election year. So everything they've done have raised premiums in Part D. They're offsetting with a subsidy. So any savings that they get from these price controls when they do go into effect in 2026, the year one savings will go to pay for that subsidy and some.
Think we'll hear that at the DNC, Pat?
No, I don't think we're going to hear them talk about that too much.
Is it true that... go ahead, Mike. Yeah.
I was just going to say, what they care about is the net out-of-pocket cost for the people they're trying to save money, right? I mean, they're not saying this is going to be a deficit reduction measure as much.
But that hasn't gone down either, because the way to bring down... So they did pay down out-of-pocket costs. That's true. The new restructuring of the Medicare drug benefit substantially lowers out-of-pocket costs. But the problem is if you're bringing down the net price and not the list price, people in the private market pay copays based on the list price. So this law is actually going to incentivize drug makers to launch at higher list price because they know there's going to be mandatory discounting. And people who are underinsured or uninsured are paying copays and out-of-pocket costs in that list price. So that's really the problem.
But that also is a tough thing for drug companies to say, right? Well, we kind of have this arbitrary initial list price that we set because we know it's going to get discounted along the way, and the PBMs get their. So I just think is your takeaway that it's just basically impossible to kind of go after net drug costs in an effective way, or is it, it just takes care of itself?
Well, look, I think net drug costs have come down if you look at in the last couple of years, and list price has come down. I think the problem is that gross to net spread, so the spread between a list price and a net price, because people go into the pharmacy, and if they're underinsured or uninsured, they pay the list price or they pay a copay based on that. And the employer, whoever's providing the coverage, the government, is getting a much lower net price. Really what should happen is the net price should be the list price. You should have true pricing in the marketplace. Companies like CVS and others are trying to push in that direction, but we've kind of created this Byzantine system and we can't get out of it.
But I think that there are entities that would like to go much further on this. Are there not? And is that the worry from the industry that this is the beginning, this is the first salvo, and that it could get, and especially if we start putting price controls other places, it's going to be like, why not? Right?
I think that's the concern. First of all, the discount on drugs that weren't heavily discounted, like Imbruvica on this list or Entresto, those discounts are more substantial. So when I'm talking about the discounts not being substantial, I'm talking about the drugs that already had a lot of discounts in place. The worry is that CMS has no formula here. They didn't do anything that established a precedent or created a framework for how they're going to make decisions in the future. So they could look at this year. They could say, wow, there were these people on TV talking about the fact that we didn't get a good discount, so we're going to whack it another 20% next year. And I think that's why everyone's trying to be a little bit quiet about this, because CMS could do whatever they want, and that's the concern.
So one last one, the Mpox, what kind of virus is it? It's a much larger virus, so it's not going to ever be aerosol, is it?
It would be very unlikely for this to mutate in a direction that it would become spread through aerosols.
What kind of virus is it? Is it
orthopox virus? It's basically in the same family as smallpox virus, but it's a large, bulky virus. It would have to undergo a lot of
virus, or
it would have to undergo. Yes, it would have to undergo a lot of modifications before it could be spread through an aerosolized route. So I don't think that's a concern. You've seen some things online about that maybe this is spreading through aerosols. I think it's very unlikely.
There's no gain of function research going on with Mpox right now.
I certainly hope not.
There could be, though, right?
We don't know what's going on in labs in China and other parts of the world that don't report and don't have good controls on what they do. Certainly hope not. Nobody should be doing gain of function research with a deadly virus of this nature.
No, but they still could be. Hopefully we're not funding it.
We should be implementing a much more aggressive global regime to prevent this kind of dangerous research that we know some labs are still doing.
And not P4 facilities either.
And not in BSL-4 facilities certainly, but not even doing some of this research. The WHO can't implement a global convention that it's able to enforce. We have no global body able to do this in the same way you have a chemical weapons convention or even conventions around biological weapons.
Right.
Yeah. Dr. Gottlieb, thanks for all your time this morning. We appreciate it. Good to see you.
You're back one of these days.
Maybe I'll see you Wednesday in the meantime. I'm sorry, that happens today. It's an alarm for a show.
But you're not.
Next week.
But you're on all day long. Make sure you join us. Oh, next week? All right, good.
And that's the pod for today, this Monday in August. Thank you for starting your week with us. Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernan, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Tune in weekday mornings on CNBC at 6 Eastern. Becky will be back tomorrow. Get the best of our TV show right into your ears when you follow Squawk Pod wherever you listen. And if you'd be so kind, please rate or review Squawk Pod on Apple Podcasts. Thank you. We'll meet you right back here tomorrow.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.